Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm Jillian Baez, an associate professor in the Africana, Puerto Rican, and Latino Studies Department at Hunter College. I'm joined with my co-moderator, Milagros Dennis Rosario.
Good evening.
Yes. And also our wonderful guest today. I'm going to introduce our first guest, and then Professor Dennis Rosario will introduce our next guest. We are so thrilled to have Marisel Vera, who is a proud Boricua writer from Humboldt Park, Chicago. Through her work, Marisel explores the burdens that Puerto Ricans on the island and throughout the diaspora carry as colonial subjects of the United States. Marisel is the author of 3 novels and a play, including the upcoming The Girls from Humboldt Park and the critically acclaimed novel The Taste of Sugar. Ron Charles from the Washington Post called The Taste of Sugar, open quote, enthralling, a thrilling look at Puerto Rico's history through the tale of one couple's struggle to survive, a Latino grapes of wrath, end quote. The Taste of Sugar is featured in the Puerto Rico syllabus, a list of resources for teaching and learning about the current and historical social, political, and economic crisis in Puerto Rico.
And I have the privilege to introduce Carmen Cruz-Venie. She currently resides in Orlando, Florida. She moved there from New York City around 4 decades. She was born in Chicago, Illinois, and was raised in New York City. Carmen holds a bachelor's degree in sociology from St. Leon University. She works many years at the Osceola School District, where she worked with homeless students, and she retired 10 years ago. She's very active in the community in Central Florida, and she also attended Hunter College in the early 1970s. And although she did not graduate from Hunter, she said that Hunter has a special place in her heart. She is a proud Puerto Rican and loves history.
Glad to be here.
So we're going to start with the questions. These questions are designed for a conversation in which our guests are going to talk about their experience, one as a documentarian and the other as a novelist. So I'm going to start with the question talking about the meaning of these projects in context of other projects that have been done. So the experience of Puerto Rican migration in the Hawaiian Islands have been mainly studied from an anthropological and historical perspective. For instance, in the island and in the diaspora, pioneers of these studies, such as Norma Carr, Blaise Camacho Souza, Carmelo Rosario Natal, and most recently, Professor Iris Lopez from City College, have documented Puerto Ricans in Hawaii. These approaches focus on the journey, dramatic experiences, job-related struggles, and the new life of Puerto Rican in that archipelago. In your case, Marisel, you wrote the novel The Taste of Sugar that was published in 2020. And Carmen, you are developing the documentary Bajari. How, on this subject, how could you, starting with Marisel, could you share how your approach to the experience of Puerto Ricans in the Hawaiian archipelago is different? Or what is your contribution?
Thank you, Milagros. Thank you, Jillian and CENTRO, for having this event, and for Carmen for being part of the conversation. I am grateful to everybody that you said, because everyone you mentioned influenced me in some way. Carmelo's books, Blaise's testimony or journals that I found at CENTRO. Norma Carr, I met her in Hawaii, and she told me, write the book like a movie. And then Iris Lopez, who's a friend of mine, the first time I met her, she said, give Vicente a brother, because they used to break up the families in the plantations, and this way you could show that. And I did that with Javesito, with Raulito. But I am a novelist, so I am a historical fiction novelist. And it's important to me to get the historical facts right. And that's why I read all the books of Carmelo. I think he wrote like 4 or 5, and so many other books. And I even went to CENTRO, and I read a lot of newspapers in Spanish, Puerto Rican newspapers of the period after the US invasion, because I wanted to see what was happening in Puerto Rico. So to cause all these Puerto Ricans to move to Hawaii. So the way I go about my work is I have something that I want to talk about, and then I go and figure out why, whatever that event is, what happened to cause this event. And because I am a novelist, it's important for me to tell the story from the perspective of the people. So all the things that you said, the trauma that the Puerto Ricans have on the job, on the ship, all of that is terrible for the Puerto Ricans that really had to endure, that Carmen is going to talk about. But for a novelist, it's great. The more bad things happen, the better the story is going to be, because novels are about the people, but it's a story, so there has to be drama. And there was a lot of drama when it came to the Puerto Ricans moving to Hawaii because of the travel, the way they had to leave their families, the boat trip, stopping in New Orleans, the inspections that they had to go through, getting on the train all the way across the country. Then there's another boat trip from San Francisco to Oahu, and for Vicente and his family, the main characters in my book, Maui. So it was just a story of a true story that was just dying to be written into a novel, and I was really fortunate to be the one to write it. And I'm so grateful for all the people, the historians who did all this work, because it made my life easier as a novelist, learning from them. So I'm grateful.
Thank you. And Carmen, can you share also your experience in terms of what is this project Bajari it means, and how you your approach, your contributions that going to be?
Okay, like Marisel, I read Norma Carr's dissertation. I also went to CENTRO, and I did research on Blaise Camacho Souza. I bought Carmelo Natal's books, and Iris Lopez is one of my interviews for the documentary. So the way I'm approaching this is as a documentary, visually telling their story with narration, voiceover, and photos. I have concentrated on telling particular compelling stories. For example, and this is really a story that is pretty hurtful, and the Puerto Ricans went through a lot. So this shows the way they were treated. There was a young man by the name of Jose Miranda. Jose Miranda murdered a local young man who was white in Hawaii. Now, his name was Samuel Damon, and this happened on September 27th, 1904. And he came, Damon came from a prominent family. And so newspaper accounts talked about Miranda in very discriminatory ways. There was a lot of prejudice. There was a lot of stories written about him and the Puerto Rican people. Okay, from September 27th, 1904 to when he was executed because he was found guilty. There was a lot of newspaper articles, and I just want to show so people could get an idea of how many articles they wrote about the Puerto Ricans and Miranda. So also, no one wanted to represent Miranda. Because he was portrayed as a savage, a product of the environment where he came from in Puerto Rico. So this is a story that the Puerto Ricans wanted to forget about. They didn't want to have anything to do with the story. It was forgotten. I think Norma Carr talked about it, and there was another man who talked about it. His name is Ronald Arroyo. I don't know if Marisel is familiar with him. So when Miranda was hanged, it took 17 minutes for him to die. So I think this is a powerful story of the prejudice and discrimination that the Puerto Rican people went through. So I also want to show a photo of him because this has been a very emotional story for me, because I have two boys, two Puerto Rican boys, two Puerto Rican descent boys. And this is a photo of Jose Miranda. He was a young man. He did not have the opportunities that my boys have today. So many of the Puerto Ricans on the island of Hawaii, when this happened, they wanted to be classified as Portuguese or Spaniards. So they didn't want to be connected to this episode, this sad episode on the island.
Yeah, one of the things that I did was I got copies of all the Hawaiian newspapers from 1900 to 1901 and 1902 because I wanted to see what they were writing about in Hawaii about the Puerto Ricans. And it was some really terrible stuff. Basically, like you said, Carmen, they didn't see Puerto Ricans as people. And I was just looking at my notes today, and in 1901, May 1901, which would have been like maybe 7 or 8 months after Puerto Ricans were in Hawaii, there were 8 Puerto Rican men in the jail in Oahu that I read about in my book called The Reef. It's like it was a worse jail that you could possibly be in. And this is where they would put the Puerto Rican men in the bone crusher.
So yeah, now that you say that, because I read so many stories, but one that comes to mind when you're talking about that was when this was happening, that Miranda murdered Samuel. The people, I think it was I want to say Oahu or Maui. One of the people that owned one of the sugar plantations was saying, I want to get all the oil that I could find and kill these people. The Puerto Rican people. Actually, this person is saying that in 1904. So that's why the Puerto Ricans didn't want to be connected to the story, because of the newspaper articles. There was a lot of newspaper articles about them from the very beginning when they left the island.
In the beginning, even before. Well, the governor of Puerto Rico at that time, Ellen, he said that the problem with Puerto Rico is the Puerto Ricans, and what Puerto Rico needs are men with capital. That's what the American governor said.
Yeah, Ellen, yes.
It sounds kind of like now, but that's what he said.
But one of the things that I found ironic is that Miranda's last name is Miranda, and we have the Miranda rights, and this young man didn't have any rights.
Well, because they weren't American citizens. They didn't have citizenship. They were like, in limbo land. When
they were in limbo, exactly.
When the first Puerto Ricans were being mistreated, and some of them went to the Spanish ambassador.
Right.
Like, I'm sorry, you're not Spaniards. But they're not Puerto Ricans either. So there was nobody that could help them.
Right.
That could help them, maybe.
Right. And there was always that feeling that Puerto Ricans were less than, because they call him a savage. And I'm like, I look at the photo, he's a young man like my boys, I don't see a savage or, a product of the environment that he came from. He just wanted that opportunity to make a life for himself. But when he got to Hawaii, he didn't get that opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's what's interesting is that, so this is a story about Hawaii, the Hawaiian exodus, but I mean, you could say the same thing about Operation Bootstrap, because we were talking about that with your father and my father.
Yes,
The prejudice, when they came from Puerto Rico to Chicago.
yes. Yeah, that's right. And I think the color of the skin had a lot to do with that. You're not white. You don't seem to belong. You don't belong in this.
Or the language.
And the language.
The speaking the Spanish, yeah. One of the things that I learned was that they didn't want Black Puerto Ricans. So the agents were told not to hire any Black Puerto Ricans. Well, you know, I have a Black character. I'm like, how am I gonna get him on the ship? So that's when I had like Vicente say, hey, if my brother doesn't go, I'm not going. Because I needed him to go on the ship because of the story that I was telling. So as a novelist, you're like, okay, how can I solve this problem? That's how I solved it. So he got to go to Hawaii.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the laborers that came from Puerto Rico were like in Arecibo, Utuado. That's where the lighted skin Puerto Ricans were located.
Yeah, the mountains, yeah.
And that's where, the mountains, that's where they went.
And they had experience like cutting cane. Like for my my characters, I had them go on the second voyage because I wanted them to go from Utuado, where my family's from, so I could write about it. And
my family too, yeah.
Yeah, and your family also from Utuado?
Right, well, the one that went to Hawaii, yes.
Wow, that's interesting. We'll have to talk later, see if we're kind of related. But like Ponce, and also they went from Ponce because I wanted to write, I know Ponce fairly well, and I wanted to write from them going from Ponce because I wanted them to go through Ponce and see how the hurricane affected Ponce.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So thank you for that. You know, there's so much here, and I want to just say as just a little bit of give a little bit of context for our audience that keeping in mind the historical context, right? That you know, the migration to Hawaii largely happened between 1900 and 1921. This is right after, the Puerto Rico shifts from being underneath the Spanish Empire to the U.S. Empire. And keeping in mind all of the kinds of how tumultuous that was and an ambiguous time for so many folks. So for example, Puerto Ricans don't get citizenship until 1917, right? So keeping in mind that a lot of these Puerto Ricans, you know, and that presents all sorts of issues in terms of legality, because I'm also thinking about what Marisel is bringing up in terms of the jails. And there's follow-up questions about that we can get to later. But I do want to ask, you know, both of you, Carmen and Marisel, you know, what do you hope that, you know, your viewers, in the case of Carmen with your documentary, and your readers in terms of the novel, Marisel, what are you hoping that they're going to take away from the work that you did?
Carmen, you take it.
Okay, so yeah. Okay, so many Puerto Ricans that I have spoken to have not heard, they're not familiar with the story. But this is part of the history of Puerto Rico and the United States. So, and as well as other people that I have, like Caucasians, Blacks, that I have spoken to about this documentary, they feel, oh, wow, that's a pretty powerful story. I would like to see the documentary, which is very encouraging to me, because I am treating this as a documentary because documentaries are powerful for storytelling. And I want the viewers to gain an understanding of what these people went through and the challenges they faced, and to be inspired by those challenges. This particular stories that I'll be, you know, that I'm connected to the documentary shows a very they have a lot of resilience. They're very resilient, and it's important to fight for what you believe, because even though they were illiterate, they didn't know how to read or write, they navigated the challenges. So, for example, one of the stories is the Lunas, the bosses in the sugar plantations. If the worker didn't come to work that day, they will go over to the house and they would pull them out of bed. I don't know. Marisel,
Yeah.
you heard about that?
No, I wrote about it.
Yes. So what they did, they will take out their machetes. And that's how they gained that respect. And like I said, many of them didn't know how to read and write, but that did not stop them from advocating for themselves. And now in the 21st century, we have more opportunities than they had. So for the younger people, for the older people, let this be a model to them that you could you could fight any challenges that you're faced with. So they have the choices. They have a choice, and we should advocate for ourselves, just like they did. And that was 124 years ago. And now we have the internet, we have social media that we could advocate for things that we believe. So I'm hoping that people could take that fighting experience that they did for themselves. They said, well, I'm in the 21st century. I can do this. I can face the challenges that I have now.
Well, I think that this story about the Puerto Ricans going to Hawaii was the first time that the United States government made promises that they did not intend to keep. And they did that also with Operation Bootstrap, trying to get people out of the island to different places and offering them jobs and a place to live and healthcare and all that kind of stuff. And they didn't mean it. Basically, they just wanted the Puerto Ricans out of the island, somewhere else, be somebody else's problem, and get everything that they could get out of them in terms of physical labor. They saw them as, you were talking about this, Carmen, about like animals. They didn't really see them as human beings. The American government did not see Puerto Ricans as human beings. They were very clear about it in the newspaper articles that I read of that period. And I mean, I'm just talking the newspaper articles, the ones that I read that were in Spanish from the Puerto Rican newspapers, and the US articles, and also the Hawaiian articles. They saw the Puerto Ricans as just animals that they could bring in to cut the cane. They wanted to, they needed them because they had, during that period, there was some kind of law, the US government did some law where they didn't want, I can't remember the name of it, but where they didn't want to bring any more Asian workers, like Japanese workers, Korean workers to come into, Hawaii. So the Puerto Ricans were handy because the United States government just took over Puerto Rico from Spain. So they have these surplus people that they don't want on the island because they need the island for the capitalists, Wall Street. Governor Allen was like this Wall Street person. Once he left Puerto Rico, he had like, I don't know, at least one huge plantation in Puerto Rico. So, you know, it's kind of like now. It's the same thing. It's
the
like
same
the
thing.
story that keeps happening. It started with the Hawaiians, Operation Bootstrap, in the 70s then, and even now. So these okay, now I sort of lost my place, but so they go to, what was the question again? Did I sort of answer it?
What are you hoping that your readers
Sorry.
will take away?
Well, what I'm hoping, a couple things. One, I did it with the intention of being factually accurate, historically accurate, because Puerto Ricans like me, who grew up in the United States, we didn't know, a lot of us don't know our history because we don't learn it in the history books. Our parents don't know it. A lot of our parents, Carmen and I were talking about our parents. Our parents were part of the silent generation who suffered the nationalists, the backlash against the nationalists in Puerto Rico. So if they knew, and my family should have known because they lived very near a shootout with the nationalists and the FBI. Nothing was told. So my goal is to, in this book, was to educate about this period, to tell the story about this period for Puerto Ricans, so that some of us who didn't know where we came from could be proud. Hey, we're here in the United States because of this.
Yeah.
And I also wrote it for people who are not Puerto Rican to see us as human beings, what we were talking about, Carmen, because
Yes.
so often we're
Yeah.
not seen as human
We're
beings.
not.
You know, I grew up in the 70s in Chicago, listening to newscasters call Puerto Rican teenagers thugs and saying a whole bunch of stuff. And you knew New Yorkers gotta be as bad earlier.
Yes.
And
I
so I wrote,
No
I wrote
respect.
it
There's no respect.
so you could see us as people. So people who are not
Yeah.
Puerto Ricans to see us as people. And the novel is ideal for that. Because when you read a novel, you're in it. And if the writer did their job right, you're feeling it. Whatever, if somebody's crying, you're crying. If somebody's happy, you're happy. And you could feel that these are real people. So I wrote it for Puerto Ricans and for and anyone with an open heart, I guess.
And I'm sorry, I read your book, and as I was reading your book, I'm trying to transport myself, you know, into that story, because I knew my family had gone to Hawaii to work in the sugar plantations, and your characters, it came to life, because I never met these people, but then I was saying, okay, so this could be my Dolores, who went to Hawaii, or Francisco. So you gave life, you gave, the characters that you used, and it was like, oh wow, they felt like they were real people. You did a great job in with the historical fiction. So I enjoy your book. I enjoy that book.
Right.
Yeah.
Some of the characters were real people, some of the Americans, like the
Oh, yeah.
judge, the sheriff, some of the people, yes, they were real.
Yeah.
Well, listening to both of you, I thinking about all the work we still need to be done for healing, but at the same time, what I see that you are becoming part of that, I would say, medicine that we need to transform that negativity to something more positive, humanizing the Puerto Rican people in a way that we can learn and not allow anymore that our histories and experience are silenced. So I applaud you for what you are doing. I also have to say I read your novel, Marisel. There are parts that they are very painful, but it's necessary to read that, because life is not a love story. Life is life, but the way that Puerto Rican have been treated and continue to be treated can be used as a tool to look at ourselves in the context of our societies, whether in the island and here. And the classrooms, as Gillian is in the classroom and me, we want to transmit that to the students too. Empowerment through history and documentaries and novels from people who experience or were related to people who experience such things. So I'm going to now go to ask Carmen specifically. And then after you answer, Carmen, we're going to show the trailer.
Right.
Carmen, why did you begin? And it's a little connected to what is being already talked about.
Right.
Why did you begin working on this documentary? And what was your experience searching for funding to support the project?
So just let me give a little background about the story. And I think Marisel has already touched on that. But the Hawaiian Sugar Planters Association became interested in bringing Puerto Rican laborers to Hawaii. And I think, Marisel, you mentioned because of the Chinese Act, it was, I can't remember the whole name, it was in 1882 that it came about around that time. The document came, they stopped bringing the Chinese. So they were looking for other laborers that they could bring. And so, of course, Puerto Rico was ceded to the United States because of the Spanish-American War. So, and then also they became interested because of Hurricane San Ciriaco, which destroyed the island and the agriculture. And I know you used that in your book. So San Ciriaco happened in 1899. So they sent agents from New York City, I think New York City, and then they had some agencies in San Juan, Arecibo, and I think other towns, maybe Ponce, to recruit people. And I don't know, because a lot of these people, they didn't know how to read and write. So I don't know how word maybe it got around from the uncle and the aunt and the cousin and the neighbor. I think that's how it got around. I'm trying to find a poster or something that says, you know, we are recruiting laborers to go to Hawaii, but then what, in English or Spanish? These people didn't know how to read and write. Okay, so my documentary, the idea for this documentary started, I did a DNA test on 2013. And that's how I found out. My paternal family had been recruited to work in the sugar plantations in Hawaii. So the first, and Marisel and I, we have spoken about this, it's been 124 years since the first group of Puerto Ricans, November 22nd, 1900. And I think they left from San Juan. I don't think it was Ponce. I think it was San Juan.
Right.
And they were approximately, because I don't know, they could be different numbers, but 114 men, women, and I can't remember if there's any children. So my family, that was group number 1. My family was group number 2. I'm sorry, no, group number 4. They left March 3rd, 1901. They made that journey to go work in the sugar plantations. And I'm doing research and I'm finding out not too many people knew about this. Not too many. I mean, if you're a scholar, you know, but if you're like just a person, you didn't know about it. So that's, you know, the story's not well known. So that's why I wanted to make a documentary and tell the story. So it's important to educate, like Marisel was saying, it's very important. Education is very important, I think. So, and this happened 124 years ago, but it's also kind of happening now. Because you have migrants coming in for what? A better life. You know, better opportunities. So this is why I wanted to, you know, do the film. But first, and I think Jillian, the last time I think we spoke, I told her about my affair that I was having with Ken Burns. So this is what happened. I started watching all of Ken Burns' documentaries because this is my first time doing this. I don't do documentaries. So I started watching all his, during the day, all his documentary. Then at night, I would take my iPad, go to bed next to my hubby, who was saying, you're having an affair with Ken Burns. Because every night for a year, I was taking my iPad and writing and listening to to the you know, to his master class and writing, trying to get points, you know, how should I go about it? So my husband calls it the can burn affair. So, you know, so because I wanted to do something well done, and I have never, not like Marisel, who's been doing research for 20 years, 24 years. This was like 3 years ago that I started doing this. So for the second part of the question, I call this the family and friends documentary. I have self-funded the documentary, and by that, what I mean is, oh, okay, so I have a crowdfunding. I have a GoFundMe on the website to but I think I posted it a year ago, and I've been getting some funding from very nice people. And so I try to contact Latino PBS 3 times, never heard from them. There was also a Hispanic organization here in Orlando that I spoke to, and they promised me funding, and I'm still waiting. So it's really self-funded by my husband, myself, and my 2 boys, and the very generous people that I have donated to the GoFundMe website. Like I said, this is a family and friends documentary. And what I mean by that is the narrator is my husband. My voiceover is my son. As a matter of fact, my son is one of the narrators in the trailer. So I have 2 educators, I have a realtor, I have a politician, I have a political activist, I have 2 parents of a congressman in Washington, D.C. So, and I have retired people. So it's like my family and friends have helped me put this together because they feel this is important for me to leave that legacy for the people, for the young people. So, also, one of my interviews is Milagros Dennis Rosario. She is in my documentary, and Iris Lopez. They're my historians for the documentary. Milagros is the part of the history of Puerto Rico, and Iris is the part of the Hawaii history interview. Because of course we don't have Norma Carr is very old. She's like 93. And I think she has dementia. And then the other people have passed away. So Edie's from City College and Milagros, they're my interviews. And oh, and I have to say, I'm very grateful to Hunter College. Like Milagros said, I attended Hunter College in the early 1970s, and I happened to take a class in Puerto Rican studies. I think they had just started that department with the African studies in 1973, the year before. Now you know how old I am. The year before it was started. So this is why Hunter College has a special place in my heart. And I want to thank the CENTRO for their support for all the research, and they've been there for me. And sometimes I send an email to CENTRO, and immediately they answer me back. So, which is very nice. I'm very grateful for that support that I have from you guys and from them. And we could show the trailer now if you want to do that.
Yes, Camacho, can you please show that? Yeah.
We must learn the history before we tell the true story.
Christopher Columbus arrived in November 1493. Puerto Rico was inhabited by the Tainos that they called the island Puerto Rican. And so the Spanish, they established a system of servitude, labor, or you want to call it slavery, against the Tainos. They fought back, but they were overpowered by the Spanish.
12 months before the hurricane, on July 25, 1898, military troops led by General Nelson Miles took possession of the island of Puerto Rico, making recruiting of Puerto Ricans to work in Hawaii uncomplicated. On August 8, 1899, the island of Puerto Rico suffered the effects of a catastrophic hurricane, San Ciriaco.
The havoc created by this hurricane left pain, hunger, and misery for the people of Puerto Rico. The island was left in ruins.
People were left destitute, hungry, homeless, and even without clothes in some cases.
Soon after, the Hawaiian Sugar Planters Association became interested in bringing Puerto Rican laborers to the Hawaiian island.
Why did they do that? There was a shortage of workers and other circumstances, social events taking place. 1898, Puerto Rico becomes a territory of the United States. In summary, the HSPA was in search of non-Asian sugarcane workers.
They had a very clear definition of the ideal laborer. He should be destitute so that he would work for low wages, healthy so that he would work long and hard, and docile so that he would not challenge authority. By all reports, the Puerto Ricans seemed to meet their expectations.
Plantation life was never discussed while I was growing up by my great-grandmother or by her daughter, my grandmother, who was born on the island of Kauai. I believe it was just too painful. It was a hard life, a lot of hardships. Life was not easy.
Thank you for that.
Okay, so before I just want to say that I named the documentary Bajari, Honor and Respect, because Bajari is Taino, in the native Taino dialect, Bajari is a title of distinction and respect. So I wanted to give these laborers, these workers, respect. I wanted to honor them for and to tell this story. And I want to say that this documentary found me. I didn't find the documentary, it found me, because it found me like 120 years after my family went to Hawaii. And Joseph Rodriguez, is my cousin. He's my fourth cousin. He is related to Dolores Beauchamp, the last name is Beauchamp, that journey to Hawaii to work in the sugar plantations. But, and I don't know, Marisel, if you know, you probably know this, some of the Puerto Ricans went to San Francisco. They went to California, and that's how they settled. So my cousin, Joseph, who doesn't know any Spanish at all, because he's like fourth generation at this point. I interviewed him. Well, he lives in California, in San Francisco, so he had to record that little piece for me. And the trailer is just for the GoFundMe. When the documentary is all done, I have to do a new trailer. I just put this together for funding. So I just wanted to let everyone know that.
Thank you so much, Carmen. At this point, Marisel, I would like to ask for you to read an excerpt from your novel.
Okay, great, thank you. This section is the first day when the Puerto Ricans, my Puerto Ricans arrive in Hawaii. They are taken off the boat coming from Oahu to Maui, and they're forced to go directly to Cocaigne. This really did happen in some of the cases, and it happened to my people here. Chapter 47, we are men, not cattle. On the first day, the Puerto Ricans learned that sugar was called pojo. They also learned to hate the men on horseback who shouted at them in Portuguese, which they didn't understand. They learned to despise the boss, who was called the Luna, and fear the plantation police with their guns and truncheons. The wagons rode over dirt roads, no better than the trails in Puerto Rico. Only in Hawaii, 5 minutes, and already they were separated from their families, cabrones. Hombre, a man should be allowed to collapse. Instead, they were loaded onto wagons like cattle, malditos cabrones. Vicente glanced back at the road that led to Valentina and Lulu. He hoped that Valentina would find a pretty little house with a bit of dirt where she could plant vegetables and herbs, and that Raulito would turn up soon. Some of the Puerto Ricans, like Vicente, had their own machetes, but for those without, the cost of the machetes would be added to their accounts at the plantation store. At the Luna's bark, the cane workers bent to the cane. Vicente reached for a stalk and chopped it twice, then tossed it on the ground. He was so thirsty, and the heat inside the cane so intense that he was sure he was in hell. When it began to rain, he cut a dozen more stalks before stopping. Surely they wouldn't be expected to work when they could barely see the cane. Hana, Hana, the Luna shouted, and galloped off to round up the Puerto Ricans who had ceased to work. He and his henchmen rode up and down, shouting, Hana, Hana. By now, los Puertorriqueños knew it meant work, work. It was evening when the guards let los Puertorriqueños off the cane fields. They didn't have the energy to complain, even among themselves. They passed men still at work, and somebody said they were Japanese. Vicente saw Valentina's trunk in the dirt. He asked one of his compatriots to help him carry it. Valentina told Lourdes to watch for her father from the open door. She planned to wave her hand around the hovel and say to Vicente, "For this you made us leave Puerto Rico? I left my sister and parents and Evita for this? I lost Javiercito for this?" But one look at her husband, wet and exhausted, his hands blistered and swollen, one look at him, and instead she handed him a drying cloth. For dinner, she served him a piece of bread and beef jerky. When they finally lay together on the feather mattress, Vicente thought that he'd never been so tired. Lourdes was fast asleep on the floor, her face smushed on a bundle. He told Valentina how somebody had stood next to Raulito on the pier in Oahu, and now that man was here, but Raulito wasn't. He must have been sent to another plantation, perhaps in Oahu. Damn the Americans. These malditos cabrones Americanos doing things so slapdash, not giving a damn about the Puerto Ricans, but when had they ever? And did she know there was a woman who was left with a child and no husband to support her? Her husband someplace else, just like Raulito? Poor things. How can they survive? She'll think of something. You mean selling her body to the sugarcane workers? She won't earn enough fucking peones for a bowl of rice. Vicente turned to look at his wife in the candlelight. Valentina, you never talked like that before. It's not like you. She closed her eyes. Let's not quarrel, Vicente. The neighbors on the other side of the wall made loud love. They could hear everything through the wattle wall. They might as well be lying next to us, Vicente said. They had a good idea, Valentina said. They laughed, and it surprised them. Valentina jumped into Vicente's arms at a terrible sound, a blaring noise so insistent and insidious that it shook them. Valentina looked over to Lourdes, who stirred but didn't wake. They dressed and hurried outside, sure that the world was ending, sure that the heavy fragrance of flowers in the evening breeze would be the last thing they would remember as they traveled to the other side. Death came at them on a horse, riding down the row of shanties, but as the rider drew nearer, they saw that it was a plantation policeman shouting at them and waving a truncheon until they went back inside. Finally, the terrible noise ceased, and soon the Puerto Ricans would know it was the evening siren commanding them to sleep. The next morning, the siren woke them from a sound sleep. Hiralu them, Puerto Rico, Jana, Jana. Hiralu them, Puerto Rico, Jana, Jana. Someone pounded on the door. Vicente reached for his machete. The door of the hut flung open. Hiralu them, Puerto Rico, Jana, Jana. A plantation policeman cracked a whip against the floor. Vicente sprang up, machete in hand. Vicente, don't! Valentina tugged at his arm. Hiralu them, Puerto Rico, Jana, Jana, the policeman said before backing out of the shack. Valentina closed the door. You lunatic! What did you plan to do? Kill a policeman on your second day? You're naked. Vicente set down the machete to pull on his pants. Of course I'm naked, Valentina said. You undressed me last night, don't you remember? That policeman saw you naked. Vicente looked at his wife as if it were her fault. I can't be the first naked woman you've seen, Valentina said. That policeman was lucky I didn't slice him up. Vicente waved his machete. Don't be ridiculous, Valentina said. What would happen to us if you went to jail? What is it? Lourdes, her dark hair in a braid down the back of her nightdress, sat up on the sleeping sack. Your father has to go to work. Vicente slipped on her dress. Go back to sleep. Vicente went outside. Goddamn policeman, piece of shit shack it might be, but while he lived in it, it was his piece of shit. Later, Vicente and the other Puerto Ricans would learn that Hiralu dem Puerto Rico, Jana, Jana meant get up, you Puerto Rican, work, work.
Thank you, Marisel. So we talked a little bit already about you beginning to write the novel and some of the process of writing. I'm wondering if you can now talk about what the process was like to get the book published, right? Because it's one thing for you to do that work of getting the novel done itself. It's a whole other thing to actually get it published. So I'd love to hear. I think we'd all benefit from hearing your experience.
Well, I'm really lucky that I have a great agent who has supported me for I don't know how many years, even when I was just writing and I didn't have any books out. So she's been my agent forever, Betsy Amster, and she believed in me and she believed in my voice. So I kept writing, kept failing and kept writing. And I was lucky that my first novel was published. If I Bring You Roses, it changed the name to this name. That was about Operation Bootstrap and a couple who went to Chicago to work in the 1950s in the factories. And that book did not sell because I didn't have a lot of marketing. Nobody knew about it. Nobody reviewed it, I don't think. So it didn't sell. If people don't know you have a book out there, how can you expect them to read it? And that's bad for a novelist because if your first book doesn't sell, then you have a much harder time selling the second book. But my agent, Betsy, told me, hey, there's nothing we can do about it. Just write your next book. And so I worked on The Taste of Sugar and we both really believed in it. And we both thought that we were going to get a lot of interest from a lot of different editors and different publishers. And we didn't. And in fact, one editor told my agent that he wanted to love The Taste of Sugar because he has a house in Vieques, but he didn't want to learn He didn't want a history lesson. That's what he told her. And I told Betsy, that's racist. And Betsy's like, oh, I don't think you meant it like that. And I'm like, that's what it means. So that is a problem, I think, with writers in the US who are not white, Caucasian. It's a lot harder for us to get published. That is my experience, and you know, I'm talking for some other writers that I know, but that's my experience. But I really looked out with my editor, Gina Ayaquinta from Live Right. She was this young editor. She said this was her second book, and as soon as she read it, that she fell in love with it, and she's an amazing editor. Because like the novel was ready to be printed, and she sent me, maybe it was a galleys or something, and she's like, okay, you asked for this, so I'm going to send it to you, but you can't make any changes. I'm like, okay, no changes. But then I read it, and then she said this, but I don't think this is true. She said that I made 900 little changes, like details and stuff. And if it's true, well, I'm sorry, but I feel like, you know, it made the book better. But she has been really supportive, and I love her. I love Live Right. And they're also going to publish my next novel, The Girls from Humboldt Park. So I feel that I'm very fortunate. It's publishing is a business. And if people don't buy your work, they don't make money. And if they don't make money, they're not going to, you know, invest in people like me, who are not white, because maybe most of the readers are white in the US. Yeah.
So now that you say that, that was one of the things why I was doing so much research, because this is a story about Puerto Ricans that went to Hawaii to work in this. So how can I make this into an interesting story? You know, not only for the Puerto Ricans, but also for everybody else. So that this has been, let me see, it's been very trying to get this all together. And I wrote the script, the Bajari script. I wrote it myself. It took me maybe like a year to do that, because I gave it to my husband. I'll say, no, I will go back and do more research. No, this has to be taken out. This is not so. People in Puerto Rico, because I had an interview at the University of Puerto Rico in May, and they asked me, are you going to bring it to Puerto Rico? And I said, yes, I would like to do that, because I want to honor them by bringing that documentary. So it's going to have Spanish subtitles. So that's why it's, you know, like how do I get this also for the non-Hispanic people? So that was one of my things also. And while you were reading, I remember a lot of the Puerto Rican had to learn Pidgin, which is a language, so they could work in the fields, they could go to the store. So I talk about that. And another thing, the parties. The Puerto Ricans were the first ones who had parties every weekend. Every weekend, no one ever had parties before they came, right? So they were the first one every weekend. So you had the Japanese, the Portuguese, everybody wanted to party. And so when they heard the cuatro, they call it the cachi-cachi, and not the cuatro, the guiro.
The guiro.
So that's why they call this music called the cachi-cachi in Hawaii, because of the Japanese.
And also the water, Carmen, like there were so many ponds and streams in Hawaii, and you know, the bathing. They took advantage of the water. And I feel like I was telling someone that I feel for my female character, Valentina, that going to Hawaii was a good thing for her. Because in Puerto Rico, she was stuck on the mountain, not stuck, I don't mean that, but she was on the mountain being a housewife.
Right.
A very traditional role, but because of everything that happened to her, she grew independent, and she enjoyed the water, bathing in the water.
And I like that you make her smart. She's smart. Valentina was a smart woman. So it wasn't like, oh, no, she was smart. She was a very smart woman. And I like that you made her like that because
Women are smart,
yeah.
right?
So in the
Women are
1900s,
smart.
yeah, the
I was
1900s,
just
like
showing how women
are.
are. We're smart.
Oh, no. I'm talking about that you made her as the woman.
Yeah.
She's a smart woman. She knows what she wants. And in the 1900s, you didn't have that,
Well, I feel like we did, but maybe because maybe it's just like any story, it's not told. The stories of the smart women are not told because this is how men get to keep women down by
Right,
not letting us tell our stories.
right.
I'm sure you have somebody smart in your family, a woman,
Right.
who, I mean, to live the kind of life that they lived, in my novel, I have when Valentina first gets to Hawaii, the hovel that she lives in. And that wasn't even the worst. From my research, there were much worse places, but I couldn't do it to her.
Right.
I was like, okay, you're already leaving from a middle class or upper middle class family. Of course, you got the devastation of, the Americans and the hurricane, but I couldn't give her like the worst because I just couldn't do it.
So I'm watching our time. I think it would be good for us to address some questions from our audience. I know there has been some conversation and some questions have come up in the chat box. I want to encourage those of you who have questions to also to place your questions in the Q&A section. It just because we're able to better manage it there, it allows us to check off which ones we've answered and which ones we haven't. But in the meantime, I can pull one from here, and Milagros, you can also look and see if you find one from here too. So I see here one from Iris Lopez asking Marisel, can you describe the bone crusher? I did not realize it was an actual jail.
The bone crusher was in Oahu, and the bone crusher wasn't the jail. There was a jail, and then there was a quarry. The bone crusher was in the quarry. I don't know that they called it that, but basically it was a stone crusher. And so what they did was they would take the men and who were in jail, and especially the Puerto Ricans, the jailer was sadistic and loved to feed the Puerto Ricans into this stone crusher. It was like a machine. I searched everywhere. Carmen, good luck to you. If you find this, let me know, because I checked everywhere for a picture and I didn't find it. What I found was kind of like a description. And basically it was a machine where they would put the Puerto Ricans in, so the Puerto Ricans could, they would grab the stones and they would toss them out. And somehow they would like be crushed. So I think they would put the stone through the thing that would crush it. So the stones were inside the crusher. And this is like in Hawaii. So next time you go to Hawaii and you look at the sidewalks or whatever, and you see the sidewalks or whatever, the streets, the way they're made, the stone was probably manufactured that way. Was that like clear? So let me tell you, it was a very big challenge to describe it in a way that would have the reader understand the crusher and also feel what the Puerto Ricans felt to get in it. It was almost in a way like a magical thinking. Jillian, you could answer this because you saw it. In a way, I try to do it like a magical thinking kind of way. Right?
Yes.
I think that we have a couple of questions in the Q&A box. I'm gonna, the first one, it could be for either one of you. What happened to Puerto Rico military or Puerto Rican military?
What happened to the military? You mean?
Yeah, that's
understand
the question. I don't know if the person means the military Puerto Ricans, or because in this period that social thing was not implemented to be in Hawaii, because that's not the case. I will if a person can rephrase the question so we can address it properly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can come back to that in the meantime.
Yes.
Later, yeah. Mm.
I think there is another one. Did you see it, Gillian?
Yes, I see the other question. This is by the same person.
Yeah.
It says most Puerto Ricans are not Spanish, or it says Mexico, but I think Mexican. What are they?
Can you say that again? Can you read it again?
So it says most Puerto Ricans are not Spanish or Mexican. What are they?
I don't understand that question. Maybe the
Why don't-
professors could answer that question because I don't understand that question.
I don't know. Are they looking for maybe the Taino? Oh, because we're a mix. I feel.
Mexican, I don't know.
I know Mexico helped a lot in the beginning when the Spaniards were, we were part of the Spanish Empire. Mexico helped Puerto Rico a lot. They had the encomiendas and.
Yes, the Utuado from Mexico that used to come to the island every year or so.
So yes.
Yeah, to pay the salary basically of the military, and sometimes wouldn't show up for 100 years. So, so Puerto Ricans are a mix of people. They are a mix with indigenous people, Tainos, who are from the area. Spanish and Africans, that's the main mix, but there are other groups, ethnic groups that also started to come later, and they're from Spanish groups that are from the north of Spain, south of Spain, that are mixed with Jewish ancestry, even Arab ancestry, so there are several mix there.
But that's a very interesting question, because when I did my DNA, I am a rainbow of things. I have Taino, I have Portuguese, I have Spanish, I have Basque, I have English. I mean, you name it. We are such a rainbow. Like, my husband is like Irish or Scottish and English. That's it. But us as Puerto Rican, and I have the Jewish also. So we're such a rainbow. Like, I could see why the person is asking, what are we? We're a little bit of everything.
One thing that we were talking about earlier about, you were talking, Carmen, about in your documentary about how the Americans thought that the Puerto Ricans were docile. And that was something that, it's like in a lot of the research that related to this topic, that was a big problem with the Puerto Ricans because they weren't. And that's, that's my character jumping out with the machete. And because a lot of them were farmers, like they had the little fincas in Puerto Rico. And so they were used to, okay, it's a rainy day. Today we don't go out to work because it's raining. And they were used to doing their own schedules. And now here they are at this place where they have to live by the blare of the alarm. It told them when to go to sleep. They had to go to sleep at a certain time, and they had to get up at a certain time, and they were required to eat when they were in jail, to eat whatever slop they served them. And if they didn't eat it, there was a policeman who forced them to eat it. So during this period, the Puerto Ricans had to work whether they wanted to or not. If they didn't work, they were put in jail, and they were forced to work, and they weren't paid.
Right.
So somehow or another, they had to work. That was the reason that they were there.
Yeah.
Right? But you found that too. They were the ones, they went on strike. They got together with the different nationalities and went on strike. Some of the Puerto Ricans had like whip slashes on their back because they refused to be silent.
I'm going to put out there another question. This one is for Carmen. You mentioned that your relative came to Hawaii in the fourth group on March 3rd, 1901. How did you go about obtaining that information?
Okay, so like I said, I did my DNA, and somebody contacted me from San Francisco. And I said, well, I don't have any family in San Francisco. And then from there on, I did my ancestry. I did 23andMe. I made National Geographic because I wanted to find out about, my ancestors. So this young lady, Rodriguez, Joseph Rodriguez, the one that was talking in the trailer, and she said, we're family. And she said, our family went to Hawaii to work in the sugar plantations. Now, I grew up in New York City. You don't know about that. I don't remember my family ever talking about that. But the Puerto Ricans and the stories is a soap opera. So that's how, I made the connection that, the people from San Francisco. So I started doing research, and I found a lot of the people that went there, the Fraticellis, was the other Manuel Oliveras, who was an activist. He's also related to me, I found out. So
Oh, really?
yes.
Isn't he the one that wrote the letters? He wrote the letters for the Puerto Ricans.
I know he was a translator.
He wrote the letters for the Puerto Ricans. That's
Yeah.
cool.
So I found out we were related through Ancestry&Me. So that's how I found out that my family had gone. I believe they went to Maui and to work in the sugar plantations, which my trip, my last leg of the trip will be going to Hawaii. So I'm getting all that ready. And thanks to Marisel, I'm doing research before I go. Yeah.
That'd be so cool. That guy wrote letters for the Puerto Ricans who were illiterate. And if that's your relative,
yeah,
that's nice.
Yeah, and the what's his name? The Beauchamp. Beauchamp was the family that went to Hawaii, and then he was also the one who murdered the insular chief in San Juan, and
oh wow, no,
yes, that was the family. That's I say they're not my family, but my cousins are saying, no, that was your family member too.
Oh my God.
Elias Beauchamp was your family member, so yes.
Wow.
So I also have him as part of my documentary. Yeah, which is
nice.
Yeah.
I mean, not nice, but nice.
Yeah. History. A lot of history, yeah.
Milagros, you are muted.
I'm sorry. I want to combine two questions because these have to do with presenting the book. Marisel Dalma asked if you have the opportunity to present your work to the students and how they being received by them. And then another person asked you if you have, if you are going to, is there's going to be a sequel of the book or the novel?
I have actually talked to students, university students. I did a Zoom just last week with students in Macomb, Georgia. They were studying like food sovereignty and capitalism, and they read the novel, and they were asking me questions about that period related to that. And so that was really cool. And I've had other talks with different students. And so it's like there are multiple themes that you could talk about. So I really enjoy talking to young people, having them ask me questions. So I'm open to doing that. And you know what, a sequel? I don't know, because I have so many interests. And if I were to do it, it would be about Raulito maybe and Lourdes, not about the parents. So I don't know. I'm thinking that maybe it could be like a streamer and somebody could write additional stories. I'm open to that as long as, I get like approval.
The follow-up, Marisel, have you given a talk in Hawaii about
No.
on your book? Mhm.
No, but I did do a book club, I think once with some people in Hawaii, when it first came out. Yeah, like a dozen people, something like that. Yeah. And I haven't been to Hawaii for so many years since I started working on the novel. So it came out in 2020. So I don't know, maybe I haven't been there since like 2011 or something. So basically I wrote the novel without going there, but I have a good imagination and I have books.
I think it's interesting some of the questions that are referring like from the pedagogical point of view. There is a person asking if I were an educator, I would include your book in my curriculum. Are you aware of places where this book is being taught?
Well, Jillian is teaching it, right, Jillian?
Yeah.
Yes.
So Jillian
I
can
teach Marisel's book, yes.
Yes, and then I had this professor and Macomb Emery, I think, in Georgia. He was teaching it. So I have Julian could speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, I use it in conjunction with some of Blase Camacho Sosa's work, especially because we have her collections at the CENTRO. Your novel brings to life in different ways the same issue. So I like to use them side by side. This is always, I feel like I usually teach this book in my Puerto Ricans in the US course. And when we talk about Puerto Ricans in Hawaii, that's always like the topic that the students know the least about. And it's also because it's historical, not that it doesn't matter to them, but I think it's harder to imagine in their minds. And it's like a time period that otherwise we don't really cover very much of in our courses, at least not in that really animated way that your book really brings alive. So yeah, I mean, I have found that students really love that book, and I've been trying to figure out like other ways to incorporate it into some of my other courses, because it's just so well done, and the students really take to it. We have, okay, I'm going to give you this comment. This is from Alyssa, who says, in 2021, I went to Hawaii and heard the presence of kokis on the Kona Big Island while reading A Taste of Sugar. As a Boricua, I was stunned. Can anyone speak to their presence in Hawaii and how this came to be?
Carmen, did you happen to come upon any articles and where, like, it was a few years ago where
1980, I think it was 1980.
Yeah, in Hawaii, we're complaining about the cookies.
So yes,
so, you're right.
Well, I think it was my family, Joseph, who was telling me about it. So I think they came in 1980, I want to say, around that time.
In recent years.
Yeah, and like 44 years ago. So, but then in Puerto Rico, they have predators.
Oh yeah,
in Hawaii.
Right.
So it's a problem.
It's like the mongoose or something like that, I think, in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, so in Puerto Rico, they do have predators. In Hawaii, they don't. So they're pests.
Yeah, I know, like when the Puerto Ricans went to Hawaii, they did stuff like they brought the roosters, and chickens, and they brought that with them on the ship, which to me seems amazing. And I'm wondering, wouldn't they want to eat it because they had food that they didn't like?
Yeah,
but I'm sure they didn't have anything to cook, so they just had to take whatever was there. Because they were like in steerage. I couldn't find any historical stuff about the Puerto Ricans in steerage. So, but I knew that they were in steerage. So what I did was I researched the Europeans coming to the United States in steerage to get an idea of how steerage was. And I also saw this movie, the Golden Door or something, of Italians coming to, you might want to look at it, Carmen, coming to the United States in steerage. Just to
I see.
How steerage was, and then I let my imagination do the rest.
Yes. And I think I just saw a question before. Somebody said something about Fraticelli, then Fraticelli.
He was
a poet. I have the two books, and I'm going to go, when I go to Hawaii, I'm going to Hawaii, and I'm going to be interviewing, because after I did my DNA, we are related also.
Wow,
Not
you're
to
like
just-
related to everybody. That's so
Yes, yeah, that's what well, my husband said it's an island. So, and I said, just like
yeah.
land is an
I should do
island.
my DNA and see who I'm
Yeah.
related.
So I spoke to Ben Fraticelli. I
Mm.
spoke to him about a year ago.
Is that the grandson?
That is the grandson of Carlo Fraticelli, I believe.
And he was a poet, right?
No, Carlo
the Decima-
Fraticelli
he
was
was
the
a
poet of
Decima-
the plantation.
He wrote Decimas. right?
Decimas, yes. He wrote Decimas. So I did talk to him. He's like 93, 90 something. So, and I would also like to visit Norma Carr's family because they gave me permission to use a lot of the quotes from her book. And so I would like to go and talk to them, and see, just thank them in person for doing that. Yeah. But, I know with your book, you've been there for a long time. With my documentary is like, is new. Everything is new.
And you know what? And the best thing you can do, Carmen, is enjoy the process.
Yes.
So you're creating something that is close to your heart. It's personal. You want it to be art, and you want it to be, something that other people will enjoy. So just take your time.
Yeah.
If it takes you another 3 years or whatever, then that's what it takes. But and you don't know how it's going to be received. All you can do
Right.
is do your best, and you do it for yourself.
Right.
And
Exactly.
it'll be fine. I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, I have a friend, I know that we're almost done, but my friend, the one that was narrating the trailer, she told me that documentaries are important, but she said, with yours, you're seeing it through a different lens.
Mhm.
Okay. So you have a unique perspective, which is you have a connection with people that went to Hawaii. It's not like Ken Burns. Ken Burns is just, he might be related from the people from the Civil War. But she said in this one, you do, you have a connection.
You have the personal connection, and you have the Puerto Rican gaze.
Right.
And that's how I look at my work. I'm looking at it with the Puerto Rican gaze. I mean, somebody who's not Puerto Rican could have written some version of the story,
Right.
but not the Puerto Rican gaze, and that's what you have.
Okay, so we are running out of time. We have a minute left, and we have many questions. We didn't answer all of them, but we've been trying to answer some of them in the chat box as well, or not in the chat box, but in the answers box for the Q&A. I just want to thank everyone that joined us, particularly our guests today, Marisel and Carmen. Thank you so much, and thank you for our great audience. Milagros, I don't know if you have any additional closing remarks.
Thanks for accepting the invitation for the conversation. Centro, thanks for making it possible. And people who they took of their time to be joining and bringing so many important questions.
So I see Edith is here, and I haven't talked to Edith for a long time. So hello, Edith. She was haven't seen you for a while. A year and a half, I think. Edith and I. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you both, Jillian and Milagros, because if it hadn't been for you two, this wouldn't have happened. So appreciate your support.
Yeah. Well, thank you to Centro, Milagros for helping me with the document. Jillian, great job. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And Marisel, it was a good conversation.
Yeah, it was. Good night. Buenas noches.
Good night,
Okay,
everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.